Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mikey on Mute. Hopefully you can hear this. I have struggled with this microphone for the last hour and a half. I'm getting very frustrated, and hopefully this is working for you. So, again, as always, I am Mikey on Mute. Full disclosure, I am not a licensed therapist. I'm just a guy that's talking out his feelings, and hopefully it resonates with you. If it does, awesome. Let's open up that conversation. Welcome to episode 3, turning my mind into a file cabinet. Because apparently I just want to make the weirdest and longest show titles possible for you. When we last chatted, everybody, I was stuck. I couldn't talk to the person I was with, and I couldn't talk to anyone else. Very much stuck in that rock and hard place. Where to go? So, honestly, what better time than being completely stuck for one of the worst, most defining moments of my life to happen? For this part of the story, we need to take a step back from one main character as we focus in on another. I know last episode we talked a lot about the person I was with previously. This episode is kind of in the middle of the story, so I want to make sure that it gets included as chronological as I can. I told you at the beginning of the series that this may jump around a little bit, so hopefully it's not too confusing. But again, we are stepping back from one character and introducing a brand new one to you. This character, ladies and gentlemen, my mother. Mom was the biggest supporter of me that I knew for the longest time. Honestly, my mom was the one person that made me feel any sort of confidence, any sort of the world is right for a lot of time in my own life. There was a good period where my mom was the only parent I felt comfortable talking to. She really had a knack of understanding how I was feeling and being able to put me at ease. My mom was a very strong woman, ran a daycare in-home for many, many years, changed a lot of lives, just an incredible woman. The mom I knew in my childhood was quite quiet, if you will. She was under my dad's control, so to speak, not in an abusive way, but in a way that mom always kind of knew her place in the household. It's sad to look back on, but it just always felt like mom knew to be the quiet one. Mom knew to be the supportive one, and it seemed to only be with me because there were a lot of times in life where I was not privy to a lot of what was going on. I get that most of us are not privy to all the information that our parents have and are talking about, but it really seemed like mom was out to protect me, and to do that, she kept me in the dark on a lot of things I still, to this day, don't know. But yeah, I mean, up until the age of 15, I watched my mom be wife and homemaker and run this daycare. And at that point, my parents did separate and get a divorce. It happens with a lot of people. There are situations that aren't really super privy to this part of the story. There, was definitely some people stepping outside of the marriage. However, at this point, I've kind of made peace with this part of the story. So I just want you to know that this vague timeline is going to skip over a couple of the details, but they did get a divorce. When my parents divorced, my mom had recently, within the last few years beforehand, purchased a separate house to do daycare out of. After doing daycare in our own home for quite over a decade, Mom wanted to have its own space, so she bought a house specifically to do daycare in, a small one-bedroom house. And so when the divorce happened, Dad decided to sell our home, and Mom was forced to move into this daycare house. I couldn't move with Mom because it was a one-bedroom house, so I moved with Dad to an apartment. But one thing that came from this divorce and this move into the daycare house was I got to see my mom almost reborn. I got to start to see her learn who she truly was. One of my favorite pictures of her is a glamour shot style picture of her, and she went and got her hair done and her makeup and just took some photos to really feel like that strong, independent person that I don't think she felt for decades before that. It's crazy to me that at this exciting moment for Mom to learn who she was, at the same time that I'm becoming an adult and figuring out who I am, it seemed really unfair that in February of 2009, my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer. That one hit us pretty damn hard. I would have been, was that 19 or going on 19? No, I was 19 going on 20. Had to think back. Oh, the memory's first going to go, folks. 19 going on 20. And I had previously had friends who had relatives that got cancer and understood what it was, and I had some distant relatives as well, but it wasn't until Mom got diagnosed that it really started to sink in the effect that it can have. And here was this woman who was just learning who she was, building her strength back up, her self-confidence, my number one support system. And suddenly, we got that news. Mom had always had headaches, but was very stubborn to just take medicine and kind of ignore it. You know, headaches happen, they'll go away. We're not quite sure how long it had been going on before it had gotten so bad Mom had to get it checked out, and that led to the diagnosis in 2009. The decision was made pretty quickly to do surgery to try to remove the tumor. Unfortunately, where the tumor was, the surgery could only remove about 90 to 95% of it. They couldn't cut into the rest without a severe risk of cutting into some vital parts of her brain. And so they were like, hey, we went in there, we removed what we could, about 90 to 95%. They said kind of, you can do some chemo if you'd like, but really we're trying to look at, 6 to 9 months realistically. The way the doctor phrased it was he looked at us and said, I don't know if your mom's going to make it to Christmas this year. That's a weird thing to hear, no matter the time, no matter what point in your life, but here I am, not even 20 years old, and it's still winter. This is, the Midwest, so it's February, there's still snow outside. Winter still feels fresh, but to hear that Mom might not make it to the next winter, there was no easy way to process that information. It was so strange, and when the chemo wasn't really working. It was making mom more sick than anything. We kind of chose quality over quantity and stopped that and said, hey, let's kind of let things take its course. We want mom to have an enjoyable few months of life instead of being sick in the last couple months to give her a couple extra weeks at this point. So here we were trying to figure out how to navigate life now with mom having brain cancer. It was strange because mom was still mom. She still sounded like mom and everything like that, but there was this weird dark cloud that none of us could get rid of. And how do you? There's no way. When a medical professional tells you that person has a timeline, once there is a number attached to it, things get really weird and perspective kicks in really, really quickly. I was not ready at not even 20 years old to think that I had less than a year left with mom. We had tried to have her stay in the house that she was in, but pretty quickly, the part of the tumor that was still there was pushing on the part of the brain that did not allow her to keep her balance. Mom was tripping a lot and falling, and it was getting to a point that we thought it was going to be best to put her in an assisted living apartment. So we did that, put her into an assisted living apartment where she could mainly live independently, but there was someone there to check in. Mom had gone in for a checkup, realized that the tumors had come back basically triple the size. They were pushing on the brain even more. She was falling to the point that she was really hurting herself. And we knew that she couldn't keep living that way. So then you come to another crossroads in your life where you have to decide, how do I tell mom that the best choice here is to go to a nursing home? You can't. I mean, it's such a hard conversation to have. You can't just bring it up. You are basically telling this person that raised you, this person that gave you life and walked you through all your major milestones. This is the person that taught me how to walk. This is the person that changed my diapers. This is the person that taught me all of my early life skills. And now I have to help decide and tell her that she can no longer live as an independent person. Then you do research on it and try to figure out the best, what is going to be best, what's covered by insurance, how much is it going to cost after insurance, what do they provide, what's the location, ratings, and you have to go through all these weird criteria, and it's a really messed up point where you have to basically shop for a home for a person that can't live for themselves. And so my oldest sister, who is 14 years older than me, kind of took that load and made a lot of those decisions that I, at that age, was not really ready to help mom make. And so I was appreciative to have the guidance of an older sibling to tell me, hey, we're going to go here. Mom wound up in a nursing home in the town that I went to high school in. Good area at the time. I knew the people. It was about 2 buildings down from my middle school. So really, it felt right to kind of go back to that town once we knew mom had to go somewhere. The staff, every time we visited, was super helpful, super friendly. At first, Mom hated it. Mom was very stubborn. I get a lot of my stubbornness from my mom. But she didn't like having people wait on her, didn't like not being able to leave and go drive somewhere. She had to find happiness in things like the nursing home hair salon. This is not somewhere you're going to go to get an extremely nice high-end haircut. But it did give Mom the ability to get a perm. And if there's one thing my mom loved, it was a good perm. So she had to kind of come up with a few different priorities and readjust that in her life. She had lived life with different set of values and priorities up until that point, and then had to shuffle them once again. And I think that's a good lesson, that there are going to be a lot of times in life where we have to shuffle our priorities and rediscover if they fit in with our values. Hopefully it's not because we all are forced into a nursing home early, but it did give me that perspective as I look back, that there are going to be a lot of times where you have to take time and adjust your list, what's valuable to you, and focus on how you can make the best of the situation. When I tell you my mom was stubborn, I can say it over and over, but let's give you some numbers to put to this stubbornness. In February of 2009, my mom was given 6 to 9 months to live. 9 months on the far end of things. My mom was such a fighter, such a stubborn in the best way woman, that she fought for 7 years. Not months, years. 7 years. She basically wanted to look that doctor in the face and be like, stop giving people a timeline, because this is what can happen. Thankfully, my mom was a positive outcome on that timeline. I know there are a lot of people that are on the short end and don't quite make it to even the minimum doctors say. I can hold some resentment at that time to the doctor about giving us an incorrect timeline. But ultimately, they're just humans trying to give their best educated guess. They've gone to school for a long time. They've seen this kind of thing, and they're just giving you an average. At the end of the day, they don't know your clock any more than you do. So it's just always a little fun tidbit to bring back that fun stubbornness of how stubborn was Mom. Well, they gave her 6 to 9 months and she fought 7 years. So there you go. Kind of just like a little middle finger to that doctor in the best way possible. So 7 years brings us to April of 2016. April of 2016, as I've gone through my work in the last few years, going through my mental health journey and trying to pinpoint pivotal moments where things changed or something happened to really cause a disturbance in how I process things. This became probably one of the biggest turning points of all. I can look back and see that there were times in my childhood where I was not feeling heard and life took a turn there. I can look back in, high school years, and there were definitely some defining moments that changed the course of how I took on life. Having my oldest son when I was 19, that was a pivotal moment that changed everything. But as I look back, April of 2016 completely changed how I was processing anything. So to kind of rope in last episode, here I am dealing with a marriage. At that time, I was 3 years into the marriage, one where I wasn't feeling like I had a safe space to talk things out. I was not being allowed to talk outside, whether that was a therapist or friends or anything like that. Balancing that, balancing my youngest son at the time would have been 5 at this point. So I have a 5-year-old at the time. I have my oldest son who was, oh my gosh, I don't know why it's in my head incorrectly here. Sorry. So 2008 to 2016, 8. Sorry, math was not math in there for a hot second. So 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, I have this marriage that I'm not feeling heard in. I'm not feeling safe in. There's a lot of narcissism happening on both sides. I will take full accountability for my stuff too, because it was a back and forth with my ex. And then bring me to April 2016. So I'm dealing with all of this. And then my sister and I get a call from the nursing home, and it's hospice. We knew one of the hospice nurses because mom used to babysit her son. So in the daycare that mom did. And so once she had realized mom was in that nursing home, and kind of when it got to a point where she really needed extra help, this individual that mom knew, because she was, mom was the daycare that she brought her son to, volunteered or tried to get herself into that nursing home to be around mom. Well, we got a call from this individual, which kind of should have been a red flag at that point, because any calls would have been from the nursing home directly, and instead it came from this individual. So here became another time where I had such a weird inkling that something was off, and had to deal with another timeline, because I had dealt with 6 to 9 months. It had been 7 years. Yeah, mom was struggling. It was hard going to visit her and watching her forget and have to struggle with memory, not know who I was sometimes. She had these fantasies that I was impregnating different nurses and often marrying them. And it was just very interesting to hear these stories come out of mom's mouth, because she had no idea what was going on. And it was difficult, but she was still there. And then this phone call happened, and we got a timeline of, hey, it's probably going to be in the next 24 hours. We didn't have to ask what it was. This was something we were preparing for the last 7 years, after all. I have to laugh because there's no way to handle that, just like getting a timeline from the doctor all over again. But now you get a very much shorter one. Within the next 24 hours, she's going to be gone. All of that emotion from February 2009 rushed back, trying to process the idea that within the next day, my number one support system, the person who believed in me and taught me how to believe in myself, the one who gave me hope, was not going to be there anymore. My sister and I went to the nursing home, and when we got there, mom didn't have her eyes open, still breathing. She couldn't open her eyes. She couldn't talk. hospice nurses surrounded, and so it was this weird situation now that we were here and had to kind of just watch things progress as they will. My sister was a complete wreck, crying over Mom and reassuring her that we were going to be okay, that it was okay to let go of the pain, and that, everyone will be safe and taken care of, and trying to wish the best for Mom going forward. I couldn't really have conversations like that with Mom. I didn't know how. It seemed too real to tell her it was okay to go, because in my mind I was pissed. No, it's not okay to go. I need you here. I know you're suffering. I know that you have been suffering for the last 7 years, but I wanted to be selfish. I couldn't have those conversations. So I sat there and supported my sister and sat over Mom, and my sister and I collectively did something we thought we'd never have to do. And we watched Mom take her last breath, which is a weird, fucked up thing to watch somebody take their last breath. You see it in movies and TV shows, and it's not something you typically come across in real life. Because it was just very much, Mom took a breath and didn't finish it. It was at that moment a switch flipped. Something completely different happened inside my head. The first thought I had was that I knew I had to take care of everyone else. I don't know if it was my sister's words or some sort of false thing I was told growing up, or what it was. I don't have the mental spoons to dig in what it was, but I knew suddenly I stopped caring and having my own needs. I didn't have them. They weren't there anymore. In my head, out the window, I needed to protect everyone. I needed to protect my sister. I needed to protect my ex-wife. I needed to protect my boys. I needed to protect everyone, and to do that, I shut everything else off. Everything I was feeling about Mom and what I just witnessed was put away into a file cabinet. And honestly, I haven't even began to unlock that file cabinet. Until the next part of the story, this is Mikey, going back on mute.